Today I'm going to be making the string for the bow. Got everything all designed up. I'm going to be using 8125. I'm going to use the copper and then the light tan. And then when you look on BCY, they have a little sheet that tells you different things about it. As you can see, it gives you the different bow strings and recommended center serving and end serving. And when you get over here to 8125, it says use Power Grip 62XS or Halo. I have a Halo in black that I'm going to use. And then it says you got all these options for the end serving and 3D. And that's what I have here is the 3D serving for the end loops. So that's how I'm going to make it. You can look in the chart. They recommend 18 to 20 for your strands. I'm going to be making an 18 strand string. So that's where I'm going to go. Now, if you don't have all the information on your limbs of which size string you need, the cables, and this one there's a control cable, a bus cable, and a string. And because this is 2-cam, the string runs between both ends. Now, I measured the old one when I took it off, and it's exactly what it's supposed to be. I got the information. It's supposed to be 55.5 inches long. So that's what we're going to be making it at. Now what I did is I set the other end here. There's a little line on the end of this. You won't be able to see it from that direction. There's a line on the end of this that tells, and I put it right at 55 3/4, which is where it's supposed to be. So by the time I wrap it around the whole thing and stretch it out, it's going to extend it out. Well, in twisting the strings back up, they will shorten it back up so I can keep twisting to get back to that length. If you're going to do something a little bit different, you might need to make it just a little bit longer, but that's where I'm going to go. So I'm going to start off with, doesn't matter which one I start with, I'm going to have to wrap this around here so it stays tight so I can pull on it. Now, because I'm doing a 18 strand string, I have a couple ways I can do it. I can do like a 10 strand and an 8 strand, or 9 and 9, which if I do 9 and 9, I'll have a knot basically at other ends. So I'm going to go all the way down to the other end, then back around here. Now that's 2 strands, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now I've come down here, then this will be 9 down here. And if I want to be the same color, I can do that, depending on which one might be a little darker. So this copper is a little bit brighter, so I want this to show up a bit more. Then I can do 8 strands instead of 9. So that would take me clear down to here. So I'm going to come down to here. Now then I'm going to take this one and I'm going to go ahead and cut a piece of this off so I don't have to worry about the other end. I can get this string out of the way. I don't need that anymore. Now I'm going to tie them down here because this rubber is tying the end loop in here. So I'm going to fold this back over, kind of fold it like I'm starting to tie a shoe, and then I'm going to take the one end, tie our little knot, and the first knot, it doesn't really matter where it ends up. Now what I'm going to do with the second one to give me a good solid knot is I'm going to loop it over here, back through here. I'm going to tie one over on this side of the knot, tie one over here. If you just tie 2 of those, it has a tendency to slip as you're pulling on them. So now I can pull on that really tight and they stay together. I don't need a big knot in here. Now to start with, I'm just going to leave quite a bit of tail on there. Now to be sure, you can always count these again and make sure. You got to count this one down here. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and this one would be 9. And that's what I need. I need 18 altogether, and I have 9, and Okay, got that cut. Now I need to take and tie these two ends together. Got too much string sitting there. So now where these tie doesn't really matter, but I like to keep them fairly close to the other one just so I don't have knots all over the place. So remember, fold this one back. Here. You can do this without any knots. I just prefer to use a knot just because it makes it a little bit, see how they slide in a little bit? Which is good because I can pull it tight. Now that doesn't stretch much here. So now I've got all this, so I can try and pull these a little tighter. And now then on this last one here, I'm going to pull a couple more knots. Now you can turn either one of the ends, it doesn't matter which one. Try and make sure you get all the slack out of them. Now what I want to do in order to serve this end, I'm going to turn this way. Now see where this knot is here, these knots? Let me go ahead and take this out and move this so we can see a little better. So I want this knot to be up inside of here where I'm going to serve that center serving. Now, right in the middle, you notice here's this loop. So I need to serve about this much on either side. So I need to serve about this much of it just to have the end loop. And I don't like to put the knots in the loop, so I like to have them next to it. So I would serve a section about this long here. So here's the string I'm going to run. I think we can probably put this light up here now again so we can see a little bit better. Remember, this is the 3D string. Loop here. There we go. I'll have to tie that knot to start with to get me a little spot going. Now when you look at the original string, this one end here has served that much here. So there's going to be quite a bit served on here, so even just half of that going to serve clear down to right about here eventually. So all I need to do is get one served here. Now there's a couple ways you can do this. One, you can serve this and then turn it and go ahead and start serving the other string all the way down. I like to do the loops independently just because it makes it a little bit easier to work on them. Now you notice this is twisting here. You want to keep it from twisting on here, so that's alright if it twists here because that'll untwist eventually here on this. So we're going to start wrapping this around. Don't need this in here, so pull that out. Okay, you can always kind of check your work to see where you're at. You take your old loop and you can see there's about half of it there. There's the other half, and that's just barely long enough. So I need to come clear out to right about here on the serving. Now remember, you got to tie it off, so you don't need to go too far there. We can tie it off. And to tie it off, you're just going to pull out a big loop. And now, because you're wrapping around this way, you just wrap the same direction on the underneath side, back towards where you started. And you may have seen me do this before, but I'll show you what you do here. Now, once I get how much I want to have at the other end, I just pull it out and wrap this around that peg to hold it in place. Now, as I wrap this one on, this one wraps off. So all I do is keep it tight and keep pulling it around. And you notice it's pulling off of this here. Okay, now I have my loop here. Now here's my string, and I can pull this. Now you don't want to just let it go, because sometimes it'll kink up into a knot, and then that's kind of a pain to get out. Now there's a couple ways to do it. You can wrap it around there, or if you have some of these hemostats, you can clip them on there, roll it around, or a pair of pliers. I'm going to pull that tight, and now that loop is served in. So now let's just go ahead and cut them. And a little bit of fire is your friend, but not too much is not a friend. So now I have this loop done here. I can either go ahead and serve this whole thing in, or what I can do is, seeing all that pressure on there, is kind of stretch those. So I'm going to turn this until I get here. Now, what I don't want to do is have that loop to be, so I could have gone a little bit longer with that. I don't want them to end at the same place. I have knots down here, so I want to just off a little bit. Now I can start serving down here, and I'm going to have to go quite a ways and clear down to here. So that's something we'll deal with in a little bit. So now we're going to come down to this other end, and I'm going to do the same thing down here. I'm going to turn this. Now, notice when I turn this moves. So I need to make sure that that stays where I want it to be. And now I can serve here. Now here's the middle, so I need to move over to here and over to here. And one of them I'm going to make just a little bit longer, because then I can adjust one. I don't have to be perfect on the other end. So okay, now I'm going to turn this back here, and now move these back down here. And you can take on these, put a little wax on them, help hold the strands down a little bit. Now you can burn these off. The advantage of burning them off is you don't have those little tails to worry about. The disadvantage is you do have a little bigger knot to work with. So now I'm going to put this right about here, and so I'll tie that knot, which is actually going to be bigger than what I need. And now I come down here, look at this end, and that's why I kind of get a little bit more, because now I can go over here and these don't line up in the same spot. You don't want them ending in the same spot. So I can serve the end of this down to wherever I need to. Now, because we haven't twisted this yet, we can twist this string. So we want to keep this on here, and now we have all of our strands. Now you can twist them before you do this, but this makes a little bit different ones. So it's 1 to 2 inches, or 1 to 2 twists per inch. So there's 55 in here. So now here's something you have to look at too. Is as I'm twisting them, I'm actually twisting one around the other, not twisting them both together. So now you can see how far this is off. So I'm going to show you what happens if you just twist them and you're not paying attention to what you're doing here. Because now we're going to untwist it. Yeah, and this is moved down here. So that's some of the things that you have to watch for as you're doing this. Is, are you pulling it off any at the other end? So let's go down here. We'll untwist all this. Just kind of showing you some of the problems you can run into as you're doing these to try and keep these straight. So now we'll go down the other end. We're going to pull that. Now one of the things that you can do if you want is you can take, like your hemostats or any other pliers you might happen to have, and clamp them together. So now those can't twist on you. So now I have all these different strands. So now I can take and separate these out. If you want to keep your colors together, more together, then you can separate out the two. Okay, now I have these colors, these two different colors. And down here, when you get down to the other end, sometimes they're a little twisted in there. So depending on how much twist you've had in there. So now this is all going to be underneath the serving. So now you can take and twist them here. .30 twists, and you can see how it keeps those strands a little bit better together. And if there's a little not quite twisted, they're a little bit twisted over in underneath here, that's going to be covered up by your serving. So now let's put this back on and see what we've done to the length. Now we are still at our 55 3/4, but see how much tighter this is? You can see that's under pressure now. So that's kind of taken up that little bit of slack that I had and how loose it was to start with. And now by twisting it, I've taken a lot of that out of here. And you can see how it's twisted. Now what I can do is start serving the end loop on one of them. And if you look, each end loop on the original one is right at the same length. So it doesn't matter which one's top and bottom. But if they were different, you have to decide which is your top loop and which is your bottom. Now we're going to use this as a template to know where to put the different pieces on here. So now I can take this off because it's not going to move now. I'm going to take my end loop material. And this one you can see I should have made just a little bit longer on each side to give me just a little bit more. Now once you get going, you want to make sure as you get to like these spots here, what'll happen, that's why a lot of people don't, that's why some don't put the knots in, because you hit those as you're serving them. It can actually send your serving back the other direction. Your first string will take you a while, but you know what? If you get the jig, learn how to do it the first time. The quality of these original strings that come on a lot of these bows, they're mostly like the little black and white ones, they're not the best quality, so, and they're mass produced. So even your first string is going to be as good, if not better, than. Now some of your bow manufacturers may put some of the high-end strings on their high-end bows, but if you get just a normal regular bow, that entry-level bow, they're going to have mass-produced lower quality strings on it. Sometimes it's the string material. You get the little better quality string that costs more, and in a production environment, if you can save a few cents on a string and you're producing thousands of them, you know, that's a lot of money saved on the low end ones to keep that cost down. And then you can always take a look at, you know, put your hands on them. This 18 strand is feels right about the same, if not just slightly thicker than the other one. Like I was saying, you need to take a look at your cams and make sure that if you do a fatter string with more strands, you actually have room in the cam. Now what I'll do sometimes on my strings when I'm making them, just so I know if I'm trying to duplicate one, I'll go down here and I will see where this is supposed to be, and I'll take just a little marker and put on there. And that way I know where I need to end up. This is where it's going to be a little more difficult doing these because I have this post to deal with. I'm going to turn this a little bit so I have room. And I'm going to have to put a little pressure on this. So now, until I get past here, I can pull on here and get pressure on here until I get past this point. And you can see a little bit of a mark was rubbing on there. So I get to about here, and that's where I need to go to. So, and then I'll put it back to get the pressure back on the string. Okay, now I'm past that. Here's my mark, and I want to have about this much. So I want to serve to right about here, which means if I put my thumb here, when I get to my thumb, I'll know I need to pull off and tie it off. Because you can see you've got about that much before I get to it. Okay, now I've hit my thumb. Here's where I need to go to. So now, remember, I need to pull this up. I get to keep going the same direction, so I need to wrap it around. Now I want to wrap about this much right here, so I'm going to start wrapping until I get about that amount I need. So I have about that much, and my knot right about here, so I have just a little bit more to go. Now once I get there, I'm going to take this. I just wrap around that pole, just gives me some place to keep it out of the way, because I need to wrap over this string, pulling it tight. The tighter I pull this, the less I have to pull on it once I get it done. See, and there's our knot. Looks like we're going to hit right about that same spot. One more. And if we look, our mark is right here. Now, was I good or lucky? Now that is the end. I'm going to cut that off. Burn that. And you can always put a little wax on it. I don't have mine real handy, but Scorpion makes a really good wax that you put on with your fingers. Because you don't want to be rubbing like a piece of leather on your string, that you can actually wreck your string by doing that. So now, you do the same thing down here on this end. Now I'm going to keep them same here, so I'm going to measure where that needs to go. It needs to go to right about here. Now the mark making them commercially, what they do is they just hold a serving and the whole string spins and just runs it down there, and it's whatever tension you happen to be putting on the spool as you're holding it. I've watched them make them when I was down at PSC at their dealer school. They're making the strings, and it takes them maybe 10 minutes start to finish, and the string is done. But they have their jig. They know how far for each bow. There's a little mark. They know where to go down to at both ends. They know how far to serve this, the center serving. So they know exactly. If you know the dimensions, then you can do it without measuring them. But when you're replacing a string, sometimes the easiest way is just go ahead and measure the old string and just do it there. One advantage of making your own is when you have it go around your cam, if you have a whole lot of extra serving, you can take some off. If you don't have enough serving, I've seen some where the serving goes, but there's still part of the strands is in the cam. So in that case, then you'd want to serve just a little bit further. Like so you can pick your custom colors. I could have done this in a different color. I just want to kind of keep the same theme here. I looked at some reds to put in my bow because my bow has some reds in it and some tans and some greens and a whole bunch of other colors. And so I thought this this light tan and black and then the copper would make a pretty nice looking string. It's not the bow I normally hunt with, but I could hunt with it. So I didn't want anything really bright, the fluorescent colors, just because I may hunt with it. But I have another bow that I have set up for that. Yeah, to get one of these jigs, I've seen them out there. The new ones now are longer to accommodate the single cam bows. This one is old enough one that it wouldn't do the new single cam bows because they can be 90 to 104, 105 inches long. And this one, if I remember right, yeah, only goes to like 72 inches. And I can't really make a string that long, so I could probably make like a 68 or 70 inch string, which won't work on the single cams. Will work on the two cam bows, but not the single cams. So I have another tube that has long enough I can go, I think it's about 7 foot long, so I can make the single cam strings. But the jig, I've seen other jigs. I've took a look at some jigs to see, you know, what would be a good one if somebody wanted to start making their own strings. And this jig runs, if I remember right, like $400 or $500 for this jig, a little bit longer version of it. And they do have some cheaper ones, but I'm looking at the cheaper ones. They're cheaper for a reason. They're not as stiff. You've seen how much pressure I've put on this. Some of the other ones aren't as stiff a material. So as you put pressure on them, they're going to bend and flex. And as they bend and flex, you're not going to want to be trying to put together a string when everything is flexing on you. And here's this one. Now you see I pull that really tightens up, so now this string is not coming out. Okay, now the next thing, I'll throw a little. I'm really not fond of these little chapstick sized wax strings, but wax through your strings, but it's kind of what I had. Okay, now the next thing is center serving. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put one end on, get it back on. Doesn't matter which one I put on. Yeah, do this one. You can see they have pretty small loops on the end of these. So now, here's where the center serving goes. Now, my center serving in this goes clear up to my kisser button. Now, you don't need all this. Now, on a recurve or longbow, you're going to go center point up 3 inches and down 6. And the reason for that is lots of times you'll hit an arm guard or something, and that serving helps protect the string. But I don't need that on a compound, because if you're shooting correctly, you're not going to hit your arm. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a mark where I want the top of this to be. So I'm going to start right here. Now I don't need to go all the way down there, but I want to have enough room that I can adjust this. So if I made it only this long and I'm off, now I don't have any serving to put it on. So I'm still going to go about this same up and down. So I only need to go to here. So this is where I need to serve it. I don't need to go down here. I'm going to start here and work this way. And what I probably do is when I get to right about here, then I'll tie it off so I'll have some down there. So that's what I'm going to do next. And I'm going to use, they recommended, Halo was one of them that was recommended. I showed it at the beginning. So you have a couple options. You can take and start with it in between the serving. Loosen this up. Separate this. And put it between there. You don't have to. That's just one of the things that you can do. I don't normally do that just because it's extra work to go through and do that. All you need to do is just tie it off. Now, look at which way this twists. Now you can always check just to make sure you have not too bad. Does your knot fit on the string? And that'll fit on there nice. If I'd have made this 2 more strands, made it 20, that knock wouldn't have fit on there very well. And I need to come down to here. My kisser button to fit right in here someplace. I might have to tweak it a little bit. They're easier to put on the string than instead of the serving. And now then, here's where my peep goes in. So I need a mark. I'll go ahead and put the peep in, because it's easier to do it now than it is later. So I'm gonna have to separate the strands. When they're waxed really well, they're hard to separate. Now what you normally want to do is take, because you have the same number of strands in between colors, then you want to do them right in the center. So you want to have half on each side. So I want 9 strands on one side and 9 strands on the other side, and generally we separate them by colors if it's an even numbered one. So now you'll have to tweak these here a little bit. Sometimes you can twist them and whatnot. So as you draw this bow back, this is the direction you want it if this is the outside, this faces to your limbs. So now I can go ahead and tie in a couple of knots for that as well. And you can do those the same way as you do the other ones. Now this is some string that comes with some of these. It kind of gives you an idea of something you can do. You can tie a knot on top and bottom. Just keep tying back and forth, back and forth. I think that's a lot of extra work that I don't really need to do. But you can take, one I like to tie, which is pretty quick, is just take a piece about this long. Cut it. Wrap it around, grab both pieces. This is a real quick knot. Pull it tight. And now then just keep doing the same thing over and over. Just keep pulling through. It's quick. It's easy. You can tie the same knot you do on the serving over here. That's what I had on the other one. But this one here is just as easy to tie. Quicker, actually. Now I do have extra pieces in here, but the string material is pretty cheap compared to doing it and having it too short and then having to redo it. Now what you can do if you want on the end of these, just tie a regular overhand knot. Tie them together. You can do it a couple times if you want. It doesn't really matter before you burn it. And then I go ahead and burn the ends of them after you trim them down. That'll keep that knot from coming undone. There you go, peeps tied in. And one of the things you can do when you put them on, I'll show you that when I get ready to put them, how they line up. You can put twists in them. You can move these knots up and down a little bit, because this will have to get adjusted based on when I draw it back. And then you can move these knots a little bit, will help twist it a little bit different direction. But you can take a string off, put a half a twist in, and see what it does if it lines up. At some point you may have to take this out. If it ends up like this, and needs to be pointing the other way, what you may have to do is actually take pressure off your string and flip your peep over. Put it back in. And then it'll do it. Now you see how this is off a little bit. So what I'll do is I can take this half a turn. Now that's something you'll be doing on your bow, and now you see how it lines up just by putting a half a turn. So that's something you can tweak. I wouldn't get too worried about that to start with until you shoot it a few times. It may finish settling in, but that's your string all made up. Now all we do is get where our loop goes, and I could even start tying one of those on. Now I could loosely tie it on and then just adjust it once it gets on. So if we look at where the loop is, it's right about here. Now I can take these, I can take this kisser button off and put it on here because I like the kisser button. Alright, now I like to tie them 4.5 inches long. I have this marked on my big roll. If you buy them already pre-cut, they're already the right size. So I have the end burnt, put the end over here, and you can see where I've been cutting them for lots and lots of times. So I'll cut that there. Now, to keep this from fraying, I go ahead and burn my knot on the end of my big bulk string, which you won't have to do this if you have your the packet. Now, remember one of the tricks that we learned on putting on a loop, you want it waxed. And when you put these on, they don't move if you've waxed them. So now to start with, fold it in half, pull both of them through. Now, you either pick one to the top or the bottom, pull one of the loops, and now, there. Now, this wraps around this way. The other one needs to wrap around the other direction. So if you start off and go this way, notice it's going to wrap on the same side. So you want to go on the opposite side, come up through the middle, around, and now over and back up. You want it to follow the same way. And that is our basic knot, ready to be put in the final position and tied on. So now it's not tight, so I can still move it wherever I need to. So what I'm going to do is take a look at this. Let's just get it close so I don't have to move it too far. So we're going to come down here, and that's where it's at. So I just need to move just a little bit. That gives me close where it's going to be. You're not going to set it by that, but that gets it close. And then if you put any string dampeners on, because that does help. I'll see that if you put these dampeners in, you're going to put them up here and the one down here. You can also put them on your strings, your control cables and your bus cables as well. So that's how you set it up, get it ready to install. The next part will actually be installed on the bow. So stay tuned for the next lesson on how to install a new string.